Hi everyone, we're back for another edition of Trev Talks. Very excited to have my colleague and friend with me, Gillian Garside-Wight. How are you, Jill?
Very well, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. And for those that haven't met you before, Jill, it would be really great if you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, and your interests.
Absolutely. So, as you say, I'm Jill. I'm consulting director for Aura. I've been in the packaging industry a number of years, 25 years now. Always structural packaging, real passion for sustainability. And I'm very lucky that my career enables me to have an impact on that. I grew up in Scotland, you can probably tell from the accent, but right on the west coast, a tiny little island called Gia. So I'm very, very aware that ocean pollution has existed for a number of years, is getting worse. We have to do more, and packaging can play its part. And I'm very passionate about educating everybody. I get on my little soapbox every now and again, and hopefully we can impact some real meaningful change within Aura and personally as well.
Great. So, for those that aren't aware, what kind of endeavours are Aura taking to help the environment?
Absolutely. So we do lots of different things. So one is to educate. So educate our clients, our colleagues, the industry on the legislative challenges that we face from a packaging perspective, and actually the benefits of those legislative challenges. Many people see it as an obstacle that we need to overcome, but actually they're there for good reason. But we also provide the tools to enable our clients to manage those obligations on a day-to-day basis. So we have many services and solutions that can help them. So really about driving efficiency. We have a platform and a program called eHalo, which enables our clients to add all their packaging specifications to be able to report and ensure that they're hitting their goals as well as the legislative requirements. Equally, we also help smaller clients who have a little less budget to be able to manage their obligations on a much smaller basis. So David and Goliath, we can certainly help.
And of course, we work together. So, forgive me, listeners and viewers, but we're a global company as well. So, we're not just focusing on the UK or Europe. I think it's fair to say that we can help anyone and everyone, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. So, the main feature within Trev Talks is Recycling Room 101. And for those that are listening for the first time, this is the opportunity for our guest to try and convince me that there's a topic they want to consign to the scrap heap. They want everyone to stop thinking that there's a certain thing that's true and give an alternative view. And Jill's going to suggest three different topics. She's going to try and convince me that her view is the correct view. And hopefully, as we said before, we're going to educate our listeners and our clients in understanding a little bit more about the wider sustainability picture, especially around packaging. So, Jill, if you don't mind, could you tell us your first topic?
Um, Wishful recyclers. So I have a real bugbear, and it's not against consumers. So many consumers want to recycle as much as they can. So if in doubt, they put it in the recycling bin and hope for the best. Unfortunately, that can contaminate valuable waste. So we need to do more. And as I say, it's not the consumer's fault. We, as the packaging industry and brands and retailers and everyone concerned, has a responsibility to educate and communicate to consumers on what is and isn't recyclable. It's just as important to communicate what's not recyclable so that we don't contaminate. So yeah, wishful recyclers feels a bit harsh on consumers, but it's the process and getting it there that's the the challenge, I would say, and one that I would like to eliminate completely if we could.
I think it's particularly pertinent right now. You mentioned it's the new year. We've just had the festive period, and there isn't a household out there that wasn't thinking to themselves, should I be putting this wrapping paper in my recycling bin? Should I be putting this packaging in my recycling bin? We're all going to get through a bit more food and drink over the festive period and celebrating with our families. Even I'm thinking to myself, should I have washed that out and should it actually go in that particular bin or not? Um, One of the pieces of research that I was doing off my own back was to try and understand the biggest offenders when it came to wish cycling. So, Jill, question for you. Could you think about which particular packaging might be inadvertently and incorrectly placed in a household recycling bin?
I think that's a difficult one to answer, Trev, because it depends on where you are. So it depends on which part of the UK we're in or which part of the world we're in. So a great example is in France, for example, not all fibre-based packaging is recyclable because of laminates and coatings. So it's very personal. It depends on where you live and what those offenders are. There's many. So laminates, so anything flexible, consumers can sometimes think that that's recyclable or take it back to store where it's not recyclable as well. So there's lots of challenges there, along with sort of household products, whether that be, I don't know, glasses or whatever, where they assume that glass is glass rather than a glass bottle. Very, very different requirements. So there's lots of challenges, but equally, as you mentioned, not rinsing and washing out can be a contaminant, not necessarily from the material perspective, but actually attracts vermin, which then has a contamination issue as well. So there's lots of issues.
I think the key word I'm picking out there is assumption. As a householder, as a consumer, it's easy to assume something should be recyclable.
Absolutely.
And I think on-pack labeling will be incredibly important in the future to inform consumers of what to do with their packaging. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jill. So, what's your second topic to try and consign to Recycling Room 101?
So I have a real issue with greenwashing, as most people in the packaging industry do, but biodegradable claims that mean absolutely nothing to anybody. That's what I would like to add to this. So biodegradable claims.
Okay, so could you give me an example for our listeners and viewers of something that's seen as biodegradable typically, or have you got examples that you can think of that people can relate to?
Yeah, so it's not so much seen as biodegradable. It's when brands and retailers claim bio, so biofilms or bio face wipes. It could be anything from product or packaging, but anything that has bio or eco in front of it makes an assumption to a consumer that it's a good thing. But we don't know how it degrades. So biodegradable just means it degrades. We don't know if it's compostable. We don't know if it's water soluble. We don't know if it's oxo-degradable. So without informing how to degrade that piece of packaging, it doesn't actually tell us anything. All it's doing is encouraging consumers to buy the product, which there's nothing wrong with. That's good marketing. However, it's false marketing. So it's not informing the full picture. It's a bit like saying it's recyclable globally, but it's not. So that it's about taking responsibility. And let's not assume that consumers aren't intelligent enough to work that out, because they are. But let's stop the greenwashing and let's just be honest and responsible for the packs that we put on the marketplace and ensure consumers know how to dispose of them and how best to ensure that we promote the circular economy.
just thinking about potential solutions, one of the things that I hear quite often is that space on pack.
Yeah.
And I can imagine if we had a manufacturer, CPG, even a retailer on the call now, they'd say, well, how are we expected to put all of the information about responsible recycling on a very small item? What would be your advice?
So yes, there's legal requirements. So obviously, any legal requirement needs to be visible on a piece of packaging. That can be a challenge, but there's also technology. So the vast majority of people, certainly, and it does differ by territory, but certainly in Europe, North America, the vast majority of consumers have access to smartphones. So there's different ways to communicate. And we are seeing and continuing to see a rise in online, where we do have access to much more information, but it's still lacking from a packaging perspective. So you can see the full history of a product, right down to the provenance of the protein or the farm that it was, the crop was grown on. You can see that full lifespan of a piece of product. You don't see that on packaging. So very, very rarely, if you buy something online, do you even know if the packaging is recyclable or not? Never mind if it's from sustainable forests, if it's a biodegradable, compostable, oxo-degradable piece of packaging. None of that is communicated when you're buying online. And I think we can do more as consumers. We expect the full provenance of the product. I believe we are getting to the point where consumers also want the full provenance of the packaging as well, to understand their impact on our environment. We're much more aware of climate change as a population. Therefore, we have to give consumers the information that they need to make the choices that they want to make for themselves.
I heard a very interesting public debate on the radio about carbon impact, which is, of course, something that's very popular to discuss right now. And I think that it was a very interesting conversation because you actually had consumers ringing into this talk show saying that we want access to that information, just like you were saying, but it's not being provided. And I think that there's perhaps a challenge here to the manufacturer or the retailer or distributor of the product to put that investment into collecting the right data, understanding the provenance of their own packaging, let alone being able to
Definitely.
communicate it to someone else. And I think that that might be a major challenge because legislation doesn't demand currently that you have that full provenance, but it might do in the future. I suppose what we're hoping is that these organizations take more responsibility themselves, that they recognize that they can educate their consumers. And by doing so, if they are brave, they will actually start to see higher sales because consumers will want to buy from responsible companies. Okay, so do you see legislation moving fast enough in this area, or do you think it should be more on the producer of the product to take responsibility?
It's a hard one. I think there's separate parts to your question there, Trev. So certainly, do I believe the producer should take more responsibility? I think we should all take more responsibility, not just the producer. So a retailer, if you're putting it on your shelf with your brand on it, then you need to take responsibility for that. Equally, they're not producing that piece of product and packaging, they're buying it from a manufacturer. They also need to take responsibility for it. So there's a whole chain of custody that really do have to step up. And there has been a reluctance. And a lot of that is for commercial reasons because they don't want to disclose all their commercial nuances across that whole chain because of confidentiality, negotiations, fluctuating access to PCR, for example, so post-consumer recycle it, so that price fluctuates dramatically. So it's very hard for them to disclose everything all the time without losing their competitor advantage. I personally think that we have to take a step away from that, and the agenda is much bigger. Yes, every business is in it to make money. You know, we're not all charities. I absolutely understand that, but the end result is much greater than any of this. So yeah, I'm very passionate about climate change, and we have to be doing more. You know, we can't sit back and wait. Is legislation moving fast enough? No, but yes, I think is my sit on the fence thing, because I'd love to see it move quicker, but we have to allow businesses to get ready for it and get that information to be able to comply. So yes, I'd love to be able to fast track it all and everything happens in an instant. Reality is different. You know, it does take time for businesses to resource, find the right platforms, get the right advice to then be able to make sure that they're capturing the right data, then be able to speak to their suppliers all the way down that chain to be able to gather everything they need. And that doesn't happen overnight. I would love it to be quicker, but I think the reality is we need to continue to move forward. And as long as we're taking steps forward, I think that's a good thing. But we do need to step up a bit and keep the momentum, take responsibility, and embrace good legislation. So there's very varied legislative requirements on EPR, for example, globally. Some are better in inverted commas than others because they're eco-modulated, for example, rather than just a flat fee. So good legislation needs to be continued at pace, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Change takes time. And I think that making the wrong choices actually sets us back.
Yes.
So we almost need to have a desire and a commitment to change. But as you say, the right legislation, the right changes. Otherwise, we will make things worse.
Here's a quick message from our sponsor, Aura. This podcast is brought to you by Aura, bringing together leading consultancy, pioneering technology, and data-led insights to help organizations meet environmental compliance and manage sustainability every day.
Okay, great. Definitely. So your final topic, Jill, to be considered, what would that be?
So this is a little bit controversial, I think. So I think the third one is bag for life.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so controversially, because obviously removing single-use carrier bags was a huge benefit, allegedly, as far as packaging waste was concerned. And the reason I say allegedly is because I continually see people just buying more bags for life. So if it's a bag for life, you need to return it and reuse it. And obviously they're much thicker, they're much more durable, therefore they have more material in them. Yes, most are made from recycled content, some are recyclable, but actually, unless we use them multiple times, and I think it's over 20 times it needs to be used to actually be beneficial, then where's the benefit? So the number of bags of life is crazy. So are they actually making a difference, or are we just being fed into this consumerism to pay for bags for life, and actually we buy way more than we should?
Yeah, I'm not an overly cynical person, but I can imagine a situation where we are essentially buying a new product, where the tax that was implemented had an initial impact. It, of course, was an income stream for retailers and still is. But the bags for life are charged at a certain rate, which in itself is an income stream for retailers. And in my research, I discovered that a bag for life has 3 times as much plastic on average as a single-use carrier bag. So talking back to your point around how much plastic is actually used in the process, how many times you have to reuse the bag for it to be a good decision. And this stat was really worrying for me. An average household still buys 54 bags. So it might have started out as a controversial opinion, but the information out there suggests that there's a bit of a challenge here. So what would be your solution, Jill?
I think there's... I personally get deliveries. So you can opt out of having any carrier bags. But I don't necessarily think that's the solution for everyone, because it's not necessarily feasible. So there's lots of different routes. And I think single-use carrier bags, yes, we're ending up as pollution, floating in the air and windy, all sorts of things. So I think Bag for Life is good, but it's how we encourage people to use it. And I don't necessarily think it's all about penalties, as far as that's concerned. I think we just need to think about how we shop now can be very different. So since the pandemic, I certainly, when I go into a supermarket, it's very rarely planned. So there's lots of challenges. Unless you're planning a big shop, then you don't take your Bag for Life. So those impulse buys, there's still a need to be able to do that. And there is a cultural shift that's required. And, we do carry, or I certainly carry, water bottles. You go anywhere, traveling, the UK, Europe, North America, everyone's carrying water bottles. So we very quickly being over a number of years, but much quicker than we have anywhere else, encompass this convenience of let's carry our own water bottle. And it's become very personal. So your brand of water bottle becomes a bit of you. It becomes an accessory. It's how we create that same ownership with Bags for Life. So, maybe they're not supermarket branded Bags for Life. Maybe we need to make them much more personal to consumers so that they want to carry them, want to use them, want to remember to almost have their accessory like they would, I certainly take a handbag when I go somewhere. So it's a bit of me. It's talking about, it portrays my personality and what I want to do rather than a major supermarket branded bag, which has some stigma against it as well, depending on those brands. So I think there's lots of ways that we can shake it up a bit. But personally, I think it's probably moving away from a retailer branded Bag for Life and giving consumers much more freedom of choice as far as personalisation, I suppose.
Excellent. Thanks, Jill. 3 very interesting suggestions for Recycling Room 101. Can't say I was actually expecting those. I think that our listeners, young and old, will be able to connect and understand those topics, which is really interesting to me. My 8-year-old nephew's an avid listener, and he likes to tell his uncle that his uncle's got tell his friends that his uncle's got a podcast. So I think maybe today he'll go away and think, Bags for Life, Mum and Dad, what are we doing about Bags for Life? So that's a really, really positive thing. The topic I think that is most deserving of going into Recycling Room 101 on this occasion is biodegradable claims. I think you've really hit on an important topic there of corporate responsibility and the wider topic of taking responsibility for how we communicate and what we do as a species, is it about marketing products so that people will buy them? Or is it more important to be responsible about what happens to our product and our packaging? And I think that I would love the listeners to go away from this edition and really ask themselves, when they buy a product, is that claim correct? Do I understand what it means? Should I be doing something different? And in doing so, we'll start to see more action because people will make better decisions. So on this occasion, biodegradable claims going into Recycling Room 101. Let's do more to educate and take responsibility for our choices.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Fantastic, Jill. Okay, so moving on to the very last part of Trev Talks. Although I've learned a lot already, I also love to have one fact from every single guest. So what is your Teach Trev fact for this edition?
So you probably won't be surprised by this, Trev, but my one fact leads on to probably two. So, so my passion for climate, and I think it's a sad fact that we're not on track to where we need to be for the Paris Agreement, and we concentrate an awful lot of efforts on things that we can control and we can see. But what I wanted to bring to this was, I'm not going to turn into David Attenborough, but I would love to, by the way. But my own personal passion has led to me understanding a little bit more about ocean health, and whales, enormous, beautiful creatures, actually have a huge impact on our environment. So a whale, as we know, are enormous, but they accumulate carbon over their whole life. And then when they die, they sequester 33 tons of carbon, which is enormous. So if we relate that to a tree, so a tree in a year absorbs 22 kilograms of carbon. So one whale equals 1,360 trees.
Wow.
But the sad fact is our population of whales is down to about a quarter to where it used to be. So our ocean health has deteriorated. Therefore, we're absorbing less carbon through ocean population. But my second fact is still related to whales. And actually, they eat plankton, or the majority of whales eat plankton. And wherever whales are, they actually they help populate more plankton. So tiny, microscopic creatures who are absolutely genius. So plankton, I've got the facts here. So plankton contribute to at least 50% of the oxygen in our atmosphere.
No way.
So the more
50%?
whales, yes. So the more whales we have, the more plankton we have. And the only reason that they can produce so much oxygen is because they capture a massive amount of carbon. And when I mean massive, I mean off the scale massive. 37 billion metric tons of carbon is captured from plankton. So that's the equivalent of 1.7 trillion trees, 4 Amazon forests. It's enormous. So if we then take that back to the whale, if we can protect this amazing species, our whole, and obviously there's many creatures between a whale and plankton. So if we can protect the health of our oceans, that has a massive impact on climate change. That's not to say that we shouldn't plant more trees and be more responsible. Let's do both. Let's absolutely protect our oceans and our land, but not do one or the other. Let's do both, and let's make a huge impact and really appreciate our natural world and what benefits it all brings to us.
That I'm I want to tell you off for doing 2 facts, but I
Sorry.
actually have learned so much there. And it harks back to last time's podcast guest, Richard from Knock, because of course he's pioneering and investigating the impact on our oceans of human life. Those facts have completely rendered me speechless because the numbers are just off the scale. And if there's one thing that we should definitely be doing is speaking to the BBC to get Jill on the next edition of Blue Planet. Those are the types of things, though, that do educate people. That they will.
I just think that we concentrate on the big things, but sometimes the little creatures in the world have a much bigger impact. So I think it's hard sometimes to relate packaging to the natural world, but packaging does have an impact on it. So we need to be doing more. It's not just about ocean pollution. It is partly ocean pollution, but it's also making sure that we do our bit, and our bit is much bigger than we necessarily assume it is. So I just think we need to appreciate our natural world more and protect it, our natural resources, all of that. So the only way that we can do that is through a circular economy and taking responsibility.
A great way to finish the conversation. Thank you, Jill. That was hugely informative. Really appreciate your time, and I'll catch you soon.
Yeah, take care. Have a good one.
Take care, Jill. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Trev Talks. If you'd like to be featured, or you've got a question you'd like us to discuss in the next Trev Talks episode, simply drop me an email using the email address in our show notes. Trev Talks is brought to you by Aura. Aura brings together sustainable packaging consultancy, pioneering technology, and expert-led insights to positively impact your business and our planet. Find out more about how Aura is helping leading businesses to achieve their sustainability objectives